When Eric walked through the front door that evening, his eyes were glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. He was clutching a sleek leather briefcase, the kind I'd never seen him carry before. "I got promoted," he said, out of breath, like he'd run from the car to tell me first. "Regional director. Starting Monday." He kissed me on the cheek and spun me around like we were teenagers. I was happy for him, really. After all, he'd spent a decade working tirelessly at that logistics firm, often overlooked while others climbed the ladder. But something about the timing felt strange. Just 2 weeks earlier, he was complaining over dinner that his boss barely acknowledged his emails. Now, out of nowhere, a promotion? I shrugged it off, attributing it to the universe finally rewarding good people. But that briefcase, it never left his side. He carried it to the bathroom, kept it on his lap while watching TV, and even placed it beside the bed when we slept. When I asked him about it, he just smiled and said, "Company policy. It has sensitive materials." Fair enough. Until it wasn't. A week passed. His demeanor shifted. He became more distracted, more distant. I'd find him staring blankly into space, or whispering urgently on the phone behind closed doors. One night, I walked into the kitchen to find him tucking a manila envelope into the briefcase, his hands trembling slightly. When I asked what it was, he laughed nervously and said it was just paperwork. He didn't meet my eyes. The next day, he didn't come home. No call, no text, just silence. At 2:47 a.m., the door creaked open. He looked pale, drenched in sweat, his tie askew. "Emergency at work," he said, avoiding my gaze. He collapsed into bed fully clothed and passed out instantly. While he slept, I stared at the briefcase resting beside him on the nightstand. I had never wanted to open something more in my life. But it was locked, with a small combination dial and a keyhole. As he snored beside me, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I was going to find out what was inside that briefcase, even if it meant breaking the trust we'd spent years building. The next morning, Eric left early, mumbling about a training session across town. As soon as the door shut, I sprang into action. I carried the briefcase to the garage and placed it gently on the workbench, my hands shaking. I didn't want to break it, just open it, quietly, without leaving a trace. Luckily, my late uncle had been a locksmith, and he left behind a few tools I barely knew how to use. It took me nearly an hour of watching tutorials and fumbling with tension wrenches, but finally, the lock gave a soft click. I held my breath and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were 3 things: a burner phone, several thick envelopes marked with names and dates, and a small black notebook filled with tight, controlled handwriting. The first envelope was addressed to someone named M. Donahue, March 14th, 21. I opened it. Inside were photos, gritty, unflattering ones of a man slumped at a bus stop, drinking from a paper bag. Then another photo of the same man, days later, sitting upright in a hospital bed, unconscious. Clipped to the photos was a check for $10,000 and a typed note that read, "Case closed. No loose ends." My stomach dropped. The next envelope was similar, different name, same structure. Photos, notes, cash. I opened the black notebook, flipping to the most recent entry. It read, "Next step, leverage Chandler." Same approach. File location, Silo B. I had no idea what any of it meant, but one thing was certain. This wasn't corporate logistics. This was something else. Something darker. I photographed everything, sealed the briefcase again, and returned it to its place in the closet. I spent the day walking in circles, replaying every recent moment with Eric in my mind. That night, I confronted him casually at dinner. "You've been so busy lately. What exactly does this promotion involve?" He looked up from his plate and blinked. "Just managing new accounts. Bigger clients." His tone was even, but his eyes flicked to the closet where the briefcase sat. He was lying. I smiled and nodded, pretending I believed him. But I didn't. And now I had proof he was hiding something. I just didn't yet understand what it was, or how deep it went. That night, I barely slept. My thoughts kept looping back to those photos, those envelopes, and the cold, detached way they were labeled, like it was all just another transaction. Who were those people? Why did Eric have pictures of them in such vulnerable states? And what did no loose ends mean? I couldn't shake the image of the man in the hospital bed. Was Eric involved in something criminal? The next day, while he was at work, I examined the burner phone. It was locked, but unlike his usual device, it wasn't fingerprint protected, just a simple 4-digit code. I tried the obvious. Our anniversary, his birth date, even his employee ID. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the date on the first envelope, March 14th, 21. I punched in 0314. Click. It opened. There were only a few messages. Most were short and to the point. One simply read, "Donahue handled. Awaiting confirmation." Another said, "New target uploaded. Silo B will be cleaned by Friday." I didn't know what Silo B meant, but it came up more than once. My palms were sweaty as I scrolled further and saw a contact saved only as R. No number, just a letter. I sent the screenshots to my personal email, deleted the sent messages, and powered off the burner. I needed help, someone I could trust. My brother Jake was an ex-cop who now worked private security. We weren't close, but he always had my back. I called him and asked to meet for coffee. When I showed him the photos and notebook, his face went pale. "You need to be careful," he said immediately. "This is surveillance. Blackmail, maybe. Or worse." He flipped through the notebook, I scanning fast. "This isn't amateur work. Whoever he's involved with, they're organized." I felt my throat tighten. "Do you think Eric's hurting people?" Jake didn't answer. He just stared at the last note. "File location, Silo B." He looked up at me. "We need to find out what that is. But you can't let Eric know we're onto him." "Not yet." That night, I pretended everything was fine. I kissed my husband goodnight while my stomach twisted into knots. I now knew he was involved in something dangerous. I just didn't know how dangerous, or what it might cost us both to find out. The next few days were an unbearable mix of tension and quiet performance. I smiled, cooked dinner, kissed Eric goodbye every morning, all while my heart pounded with every word he said. Meanwhile, Jake did his digging. He called in a favor with a friend in cybercrime and sent him scans of the notebook and the texts I'd pulled from the burner phone. By Thursday, he had something. We met at a diner off the highway, sitting in the farthest booth from the windows. "Silo B isn't a place," he said, sliding his phone toward me. "It's a code name. Some kind of off-the-book storage system. Digital files. Encrypted, buried deep." But we traced one file's metadata. It was accessed from an IP address linked to Eric's office. "These files connect your husband to people who've gone missing." He paused, studying my face. "He's not just involved. He's central." My stomach twisted. Jake leaned closer. "You need to get out. Now. At least until we know more." But I couldn't leave without understanding everything. "There's one more thing," I said, showing him the name Chandler from the notebook. Jake's face hardened. "Mark Chandler went missing last year. He was a whistleblower in a government defense contract case. His name was scrubbed from most databases. If Eric has any link to him, he didn't finish." We both knew what that meant. That night, I acted normal. I laughed at his jokes, poured his wine, nodded as he talked about work. But every part of me burned with urgency. When he finally fell asleep, I crept out of bed, grabbed the briefcase again, and opened it with ease. At the bottom was something new, a USB drive wrapped in black tape and a post-it note that read, "For our only." I pocketed it and left the briefcase untouched. The next morning, I gave it to Jake. He called 2 hours later. "You need to hear this," he said. When I arrived, he plugged in the drive and played a single audio file. It was Eric's voice. Calm. Cold. "Chandler's been neutralized. No trail. Tell her we'll use the same method for the wife if she gets suspicious." My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. The wife. Me. My husband had a plan in place to silence me if I got too close. I sat frozen in Jake's apartment, the sound of Eric's voice looping in my head like a broken record. Use the same method for the wife. That wasn't just business talk. That was a threat. A real one. I looked at my brother, waiting for him to tell me it was a misunderstanding, a bad joke, anything. But he didn't. He just stared at me, jaw clenched. "You can't go back there," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever. We need to go to the police." But something deep inside me resisted. Not out of love. Out of strategy. "No," I whispered. "If he knows I know, he'll vanish. He's too careful. I need to play this out. Just for a little longer." Jake hated the idea. But he knew me. Once my mind was set, there was no changing it. So I went back. I kissed Eric when he got home, smiled when he told me he'd be away on business for the weekend. "Corporate retreat," he said, sipping wine. "Very hush-hush. Won't have cell signal." Perfect. As soon as he left Friday morning, I went to work. Jake stayed parked across the street just in case. I tore through Eric's office at home, looking for anything else I'd missed. In a drawer I hadn't checked before, I found a second phone, identical model, no SIM card. It had one number saved, R. I turned it off immediately and slid it into my purse. Then, under a false bottom in the file cabinet, I found a manila envelope labeled Red Queen Protocol. Inside were satellite images, timestamped logs, and a list of names, one of which was mine. I scanned down the sheet and found a note scribbled beside it in Eric's handwriting. Engagement status, active. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. My name. On a list. With a plan. My fingers trembled as I took photos of every page and uploaded them to a secure drive Jake had set up. By nightfall, Eric still hadn't contacted me, but someone else did. An unknown number sent a text. "We know what you took. Return it. No one has to get hurt." My blood ran cold. I showed Jake. He stared at the screen and said, "They're watching you." I looked out the window and for the first time, truly felt it. This wasn't just about Eric anymore. I had stumbled into something much, much bigger, and I wasn't sure I'd make it out. That night, every creak in the house felt like footsteps. I left the curtains open just a sliver, just enough to let in the amber glow of the streetlight and see the silhouette of the car that hadn't moved in hours. Jake stayed in contact, but we agreed not to meet in person. "They're expecting that," he said. "Let's keep them guessing." I clutched my phone as another message arrived. "Last warning. You're interfering with operations." Operations. That word stuck with me like a splinter. I needed to know what the hell Eric was wrapped up in. If I was going to destroy this thing, I had to understand it first. So I made a choice I once swore I never would. I drove to his office. It was after 10 p.m. The lot was mostly empty, except for a few maintenance trucks. I wore a ball cap, kept my head down, and walked in like I belonged. The security guard didn't even glance up. Eric's office was on the top floor. I took the stairs, heart pounding, praying the keycard I lifted from his coat pocket earlier that week still worked. It did. The door clicked open. His office was immaculate. Too clean. The drawers were empty, his desktop computer locked with a password I couldn't guess. But then I spotted a floor vent that looked newer than the rest. I knelt, pried it open, and found a hidden box taped inside. Inside the box were 2 flash drives, a stack of fake passports, and a bundle of foreign currency. And one more thing, a photo of Eric, sitting across a table from a man I recognized from news stories, Victor Hale, a corporate whistleblower who had vanished last year. My husband wasn't part of a corporation. He was part of a cover-up. Or maybe the cleanup. I took the drives and left the office, trying to stay calm as I passed the guard again. As soon as I got into the car, I called Jake. "I have new files," I said. He told me to meet him at a friend's cabin 2 hours out of town. We'd sort through everything there. But as I pulled onto the highway, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. No turn signal, no passing attempt. Just steady, relentless distance. I switched lanes. So did they. I exited early. They followed. I was no longer just being watched. I was being hunted. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as the headlights loomed behind me, unwavering. My mind raced. Should I call Jake? The police? But if Eric's operation had infiltrated law enforcement, as I was beginning to suspect, then I couldn't trust anyone outside our circle. I made a split-second decision and veered off onto a narrow country road, one I only knew because of a wrong turn years ago on a date with Eric. The car followed, its engine humming low, keeping just enough distance to not raise suspicion from anyone who might notice, if there had been anyone around. I killed my headlights for a moment, let the car slide into a patch of trees, and watched as the other vehicle crept past slowly, scanning the road. My hands were shaking, but I waited a full 10 minutes before backing out and taking the long way to the cabin. Jake was already there, pacing, his shirt damp with sweat. "You were tailed," he said without preamble. I heard it on the scanner. Local patrol spotted a black sedan idling at a gas station not far from here, but it took off before they could ID it. I handed him the flash drives. "There's more. Passports, money, a photo of Eric with Victor Hale. He lied about everything, Jake. Everything." He plugged the drives into his laptop, and we began combing through folder after folder, coded documents, email threads with encrypted senders, financial spreadsheets with laundered funds routed through offshore accounts. But the most damning file was a video, grainy, timestamped from 6 months ago. It showed Eric entering a warehouse. A man, gagged and bound, was slumped in a chair. The same man from one of the briefcase photos. Eric leaned in, whispered something, then turned to someone off camera and nodded. The screen went black. Jake paused it, looking grim. "This isn't some side hustle. This is an operation. Blackmail, silencing, maybe even contract work. Your husband, he's not who you think he is." I sat back, stunned silent. But before I could speak, Jake's phone buzzed. A blocked number. He put it on speaker. "Leave the files. Walk away. You're being watched," the voice said, distorted. Then it hung up. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just me in danger anymore. They knew about Jake. They knew everything. And we were officially out of time. We barely slept that night. Jake boarded up the windows, kept a loaded pistol by his side, and took shifts watching the road. I tried to rest, but every sound felt like a threat. The voice on the phone had been deliberate, cold, rehearsed. They weren't bluffing, they had eyes on us, and they wanted the files erased, buried, forgotten. By dawn, Jake had a plan. "We're going to leak this," he said. "Every drive, Every document, every video, it's all going online. We'll make it so public they can't touch us without drawing heat. He started compiling the files, layering them with metadata to verify their authenticity. Meanwhile, I went through the last drive again and found a folder labeled Fallout Protocol. Inside was a list of names, all connected to past whistleblowers and corporate insiders, many of whom had mysteriously disappeared. But one name made my skin crawl: mine. Next to it, neutralize if compromised. My hands trembled. I was a contingency plan. Insurance. Disposable. That's when I remembered something else. Eric's weekend retreat. He said he'd be off-grid. What if that wasn't a trip? What if he'd gone to tie up loose ends, including me? I searched the files again, this time using location filters. One coordinate popped up repeatedly: an old mining property in the mountains 2 hours west. I sent it to Jake. We need to go there, I told him. He argued, but in the end, he knew I was right. If we could catch Eric in the act, see what he was doing there, we'd have undeniable proof. We left that evening, taking back roads and switching cars with a contact of Jake's. As we approached the site, the terrain grew rougher, the trees thicker. We parked a mile out and hiked the rest, flashlights off, relying on moonlight and instinct. Then we saw it, a cabin, not abandoned, but fortified. Surveillance cams at the corners. A jeep parked around the back. We crouched behind a tree, watching. After 20 minutes, the front door opened. Eric stepped out. He looked calm, collected, and not alone. A man followed him, older, balding, with a limp. Jake nudged me. That's Hale. Victor Hale. The guy who's supposed to be dead. My breath caught. What was Eric doing with him? And if Victor was alive, then everything we thought we knew was about to unravel. We stayed hidden in the underbrush, barely daring to breathe. Eric and Hale stood by the porch, speaking in low, animated tones. We couldn't hear much, but we caught fragments. Delivery tomorrow. Payment cleared. She doesn't know yet. My name wasn't said aloud, but I could feel it hanging in the air like static. Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a compact directional microphone, aiming it toward the porch. The audio crackled to life in our earpieces. Took the bait, Eric was saying. She found the files, just like we planned. She's emotional, predictable. Hale lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. And the brother? Watching her. Feeding the leak just enough to make it believable. Jake stiffened beside me, then yanked off his earpiece. What the hell? He whispered. They knew I'd help you. They played me. My head spun. The leaked files, the drive, the warnings, had all of it been orchestrated? I watched as Eric turned toward the trees, as if sensing something. She thinks she's a step ahead, he said. But tomorrow, it's done. Hale chuckled. You're cold, man. She's your wife. Was, Eric said. She made her choice. That word was burned into my spine. I felt sick. Jake and I retreated silently through the woods, retreating back to the car. We didn't speak until we were speeding down the mountain road. It's a setup, I whispered. They wanted us to find those files. They knew we'd leak them. Jake slammed the steering wheel. Which means the real evidence is somewhere else. This was a decoy to keep us busy while they finish whatever's about to happen. Then we need to stop it, I said, feeling fury boil past the fear. We flipped their plan. We drove back to the city and made a list. Every contact, every safe house, every pattern of Eric's over the last month. We narrowed it down to one key location, a warehouse downtown registered under a shell company. Jake said it was used occasionally by a subcontractor linked to Hale's last known employer. If there was a real operation in motion, that's where it would happen. We go tomorrow, he said. And we end this. For real. That night, I sent Eric a message from an anonymous number. I know what you did. I'm coming. Less than a minute later, the screen flashed with a reply. Then I guess we're finally being honest with each other. The warehouse loomed in the morning fog like something out of a nightmare, gray, unmarked, and surrounded by silence. Jake and I parked a block away and approached on foot, taking side alleys and keeping our heads down. The building had a rear entrance with a rusted fire door. Jake tested the knob. Unlocked. We slipped inside, hearts pounding in sync. The interior was cavernous, dimly lit by industrial lamps hanging high above. Pallets were stacked in rows, some empty, others covered with tarps. In the far corner, we heard voices. We crept closer, ducking behind crates until we saw them. Eric, Hale, and two other men in tactical gear. A black van idled nearby with its back doors open. I scanned the floor and saw something that made my blood freeze. A chair, bolted to the concrete. Restraints. And a camera tripod already set up. Jake whispered, they're staging something. A message, maybe. Or a false confession. Then I noticed a woman, blindfolded, bound, slumped in the corner. I gasped. That's not me, I whispered. Jake's eyes narrowed. No, that's not the plan. That's bait. It hit me in a rush. They knew I'd come. This wasn't about a target. This was a trap. For me. Jake pulled out his phone and hit send on a silent alert he'd prepped earlier. It would ping his contact in law enforcement with our location and a copy of the video files we'd uncovered. But it would take time. We can't wait, I said. We have to stop this now. We spotted a breaker panel on the wall. Jake made his way to it while I circled toward the van. I opened the front door slowly, disabled the handbrake, and let it roll just a few feet. Then Jake cut the lights. Chaos erupted. Shouts echoed in the dark. I sprinted forward, grabbed the woman, and dragged her behind the van. She whimpered through the gag but didn't scream. Flashlights flickered. Gunmetal glinted in the dark. Then I heard Eric's voice, furious, sharp. Find her. Do it now. Jake tackled one of the men from behind while I shoved open the warehouse bay doors. Floodlights from approaching cruisers pierced the fog. Sirens wailed. The trap had snapped shut, but not on me. On him. As officers stormed the warehouse, Eric locked eyes with me one last time before they forced him to the ground. His face didn't show fear, just disappointment, like I'd failed some twisted test. I turned away. I wasn't his pawn anymore. The warehouse raid was on every major news outlet by midday. Headlines screamed about the takedown of a covert corporate crime ring, led by a trusted executive hiding in plain sight. Eric's photo, my husband, was everywhere. But the details remained vague. Authorities were tight-lipped about the deeper layers. Only Jake and I knew how far the web actually stretched. At the precinct, I watched through the two-way mirror as Eric sat handcuffed, calm, almost smug. Hale had already flipped, offering names and locations in exchange for protection. But Eric? He said nothing. He hadn't even asked for a lawyer. The detectives were baffled. He's not cracking, one said. He thinks he still has control. I knew why. In his mind, he always did. That afternoon, I was asked to give a formal statement. I laid everything out, the files, the briefcase, the cabin, the fake retreat, the burner phone. When I finished, the lead investigator leaned forward and said, "We believe there's more. A backup plan. Something bigger." I nodded. "Then we have to follow the last breadcrumb." There was one thing left, one part of the puzzle I hadn't touched, the safe in our home office. I'd ignored it during the search because I thought it only held financial documents. But now I wasn't so sure. Jake and I returned home, battered and wired, and opened it. Inside was a velvet pouch. It held a thumb drive, a gold ring I'd never seen before, and a handwritten note addressed to me. "If you're reading this, you outplayed me. I'm impressed. But you were never supposed to be part of this world, Natalie. I kept it from you for a reason. That was my mistake. You think you've won. But I've always been a few steps ahead. This isn't the end. It's just the pause." My fingers trembled as I dropped the note. Jake plugged in the drive. Inside were coordinates, dozens of them. Vaults, shell accounts, encrypted file paths. A map of what we now knew was a global operation. Eric hadn't just played a part. He was the architect. And even in a cell, he still had leverage. The next day, the agency requested protection for me. "We believe retaliation is possible," they said. I packed a bag, hugged Jake, and entered witness protection under a new name. As we drove away, I looked back one last time. My old life, my home, my marriage, my illusion shrinking in the distance. I wasn't the same woman who opened that briefcase. That woman was gone. And what replaced her? Someone stronger. Someone ready. 6 months later, I lived in a small coastal town under the name Claire. New ID, new apartment, new life. I worked mornings at a bookstore, took long walks by the sea, and tried to forget the woman I used to be. But some nights, when the wind howled against the window, I could still hear Eric's voice in my head. This isn't the end. It's just the pause. Jake kept in contact through coded emails. The investigation had widened globally. Arrests were still happening. Hale had testified under oath, naming a dozen high-ranking officials and executives. Eric, though, he remained silent. Not a single word since his arrest. That silence unsettled the agents. They believed he'd embedded digital failsafes, deadman switches that would release sensitive data if anything happened to him. He was still pulling strings without lifting a finger. One day, I came home to find a package at my door. No return address. I froze. Inside was a simple envelope and a USB drive. No note. I stared at it for hours before plugging it into my laptop, which I disconnected from Wi-Fi just in case. A video file loaded. Eric, sitting calmly in what looked like an interrogation room. "If you're watching this," he began, "you've proven capable. I underestimated you." He leaned forward. "But ask yourself, why was it all so easy to find? Why did I let the threads unravel?" He smiled slightly. "Because there's another game you haven't even seen, and you're already playing it." The video ended. No threats, no instructions, just that cryptic final message. Jake ran forensic analysis. The video had been recorded weeks ago, but only released now, through a hidden time server, meaning Eric had planned its delivery all along. I realized then, I might never be free of him. Not fully, but I also understood something else. I wasn't scared. He may have built the game, but I'd changed the rules. I kept the video, locked away in a hidden drive, a reminder of what I'd survived. And if the next chapter ever came, I'd be ready. Because monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes, they wear wedding rings. And when they show you who they are, believe them.